Hello, Internet. Welcome to episode 199 of the Assorted Calibers podcast, the Second Amendment podcast that is a little bit for everyone. I'm Weer'd, and with me, as always, is the loveliest hostess in the world, Erin Paulette. How you?
Citation needed.
If the citation is needed, it means you haven't met Erin Paulette. And I will say, Erin, you could not have met Erin Paulette the way we have met Erin Paulette, because that's like, you know, looking at the character in your first person video game. The best you could do is walk up to the mirror and look at it. But we get to see you in all your glory.
Yeah, I have no idea how to respond to that. So for the people who keep track of such things, I am doing better than last week. Thank you very much. Things still aren't really great, and I'm not going to bore you about it because that's not why you come here. So I'm still a little bit tired and cranky and whatnot, and so I'm probably not going to bring my A game. But to everyone who wished me well last week, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And as what's his name, who played Gomez in the TV Addams Family, and who also played Judge Stone's father on Night Court, I'm doing much better now.
I say, don't know the actor that played Gomez Addams in the TV show. It was Raul Julia in the movie. John Aston.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there. I am glad you're doing better, Erin. We have already been talking at great lengths that will not go into the blooper reel because A, boring, B, personal.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm glad you are doing much better.
Oh, here we go.
I don't even get the context of this. I had a little setback with the Cheese Whiz, but I got back on track, except for that Saran Wrap incident. But I'm feeling much better now.
Okay, so the context is when Harry met him, he had just recently gotten out of, I don't know if they still had asylums back then, but basically he had been committed for mental health issues. And so every time he said that, the implication was, I was really messed up before, but I'm feeling much better now. And that last line was really hammed up. And it's a testament to his comedic skills that was funny.
I will have to say Saran Wrap is just awful stuff, and I despise it. It is called cling wrap, and it clings to itself better than any other substance on earth. At least for me. I suck at it. I'm a man of many talents. Saran Wrap is not one of them.
So how are you doing, Weer'd?
I'm doing okay. I just doing a lot of housewife crap. It was a boring day. I don't want to bore everyone to death. Though I did make some baguettes that turned out a whole lot better. And my wife, when she got home, I'm like, hey, go open up that bread bag over there. And she looked at it and goes, you made this? You could sell this. I'm like, yeah, it looks really good.
How about you tell our listeners briefly, who am I kidding? I know who I'm talking to. The story about your daughter wanting to scratch.
Wanting to scratch?
The vinyl records?
Oh, yes. I just told Erin we were talking about going through your dad's stuff, and I was talking about we have my father-in-law's record collection, and we've had it for a while. When he moved down to Florida, he did not want to move his records or his turntable, and so my wife took possession of that. And now that my father-in-law is completely gone. We're just like, oh, he's not going to be able to listen to these ever again, no matter what, or request anything. So we should get rid of them. And we were sorting through them. And in the meantime, when we had these boxes of records sitting in our living room, my daughter saw it was like a PBS Kids thing where the kids went to like a hip hop studio and the guy there was doing record scratching. And she's like, that looks really cool. And she's like, I want to do that. So we dug through the collection. My wife was finding records of value in my father-in-law's collection and pulled out like a 25-cent Barbra Streisand album and said, here, you can have this one. And so occasionally we will be sitting there and we will hear a very warbly, warped record of Barbra Streisand. So it has that kind of vibrato to it. And then juk, 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 juk. And then it'll be back to Barbra Streisand. And it's like crappy 70s. I mean, all Barbra Streisand is crappy Barbra Streisand. If you love Barbra Streisand, I'm sorry, but you're wrong. But this is like Barbra Streisand of the 70s, which is by far the worst of the Barbra Streisand. Even Over the Hill Barbra Streisand was better than that Barbra Streisand. And so, yeah, my daughter will occasionally get down to some DJ scratching with Barbra Streisand records. What have you posted, Aaron? Aaron, what have you done?
It is the official video. Which makes me laugh just by itself. There's an official video of the song Barbra Streisand by Duck Sauce.
I have not heard of this band, but the splash screen for that video means that I need to learn more.
It's approximately 30 to 45 seconds of earworm, which you may have seen associated with like back when Flash was a thing. I would class it in the same category as like, the Sparta remixes, if that means anything to you. But then they stretched it out into, I'm not really sure, 3 minutes, 16 seconds. Okay, I'm just going to play the first little bit for you. I'm sure you'll want to listen to the whole thing. But this is the most recognizable part. Yeah. And it just repeats like that. And every so often, drum, drum, Barbra Streisand. Woo, woo, woo.
And I assume that's Babs in the sample.
Yes, it is. Apparently, I mean, it shouldn't come as a shock because the song is named after her. So they actually... Okay, I don't really know how old she is now. I don't know if... I truly don't know if they just got the rights to use an old video and that's the music that they took from it, or if they actually got her to record a thing and she was singing along. I don't know. I really don't care what the answer is.
I am willing to bet cash money that they did not contact Barbra Streisand, but somebody who has been in the recording industry as long as Barbra Streisand has been. I guarantee there's lots and lots of stuff that she either wrote or performed that does not belong to her. And the people that own it have no relationship with her anymore, and possibly never did because of just changing hands, like your mortgage getting bundled. That yeah, you get this, these like 2 years of Barbra Streisand's career as part of the assets for this recording studio that you've acquired. And those people are willing to sell off anything. It's like when Tom Waits left Asylum Records to go to Island Records. He left that group that he'd been that had his several albums, and they had his demo reel, and they decided to publish Tom Waits: The Early Years Volume 1 and Volume 2. and there's some songs that had not appeared before that, or had only appeared in some fairly obscure stuff, and then a bunch of songs that appeared in his in the records that he had come out with before then, before leaving for Island, and they are demo reels. So it's like a 21-year-old Tom Waits, just generally it's either him playing a piano or him playing a guitar and singing into the mic. And half the time the song is kind of half baked because the later version of it will be much more refined, and it's just unlistenable. It's listenable. You can appreciate it, but it is like one of the few Tom Waits albums that I do not own, because who cares? This is stuff that was never meant to be heard. It's like the ACP blooper reel of Tom Waits' career. So yeah, that's probably what it is. It was probably something that, hey, we would like to buy the rights to this obscure Barbra Streisand song or video. And they're like, you know what? It's not making us any money right now, but it's making money now. Take it. It's yours. Oh, that's funny. Oh, Aaron. So, you know what? So I'm going to switch to a different kind of funny. This made me laugh. So Dr. Oz, I forget what his full name is, but like his Twitter handle is Dr. Mehmet Oz. So I know Oz is short for something else. But for those that don't know, he's running for Senate, and I can't even remember what state it is now.
I think it said Pennsylvania.
Yes, that is correct. So he's running for the Pennsylvania Senate, and there's been a lot of talk. He's running as a Republican, and Republicans are very, very quick to give him the brand of Rhino, Republican in name only, because of some of his past positions that he's held, and just his general showbiz nature. And he has put out a campaign video where this is his Second Amendment video. And this was, I saw this off of, it's in the show notes, Jack Prosobiec. I don't even know how to pronounce his name, but this guy puts out a lot of interesting Twitter stuff. It'd be almost worth me making a Twitter account just for this guy. But it turned out the reason why he was publishing it was, I didn't read his commentary, I just watched the video, was that he notes that Dr. Oz is left-handed, and he shoots an over-under shotgun, a pistol, and an AR-15 in the video, and he shoots the shotgun and the pistol left-handed, but he shoots the AR-15 right-handed. And so he was just questioning, why is he switching hands? And I've got to assume that either Dr. Oz was uncomfortable with the brass and the gas that comes out of the ejection port of the AR when it's being fired, and so therefore it was more comfortable to shoot right-handed. Or my guess that I was saying in a group of people was that he's got some sort of old school FUD that just says, oh no, you got to shoot a semi-auto right-handed, because otherwise that brass will poke your eye out, son.
The thing is, though, if you go to the 9-second mark where he's firing the pistol, mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure he's firing that pistol in his right hand.
Oh, he is. He absolutely is. You're correct. I only looked at the, if you scroll down on the Twitter thing, he's actually got the screenshots of it as well.
Okay, I could understand if Dr. Oz was, say, cross-dominant. Mm-hmm. But a lot of this doesn't make sense. Like, in the very first scene, he's got a break-open shotgun, and he is loading the shells with his left hand. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, just the way he's doing it seems odd to me. All right, but then, in the next scene, he's holding the shotgun, and he's very clearly left-handed, and he does shoot the shotgun left-handed, but he shoots the pistol with his right hand, and we never see him shooting the AR, but he's holding it and he's loading it right-handed, and it's all very strange.
Yeah. I mean, that was my big takeaway from it, is I really didn't care about the shooting positions. It was more of the, he seems somewhat comfortable with the over-under shotgun, which itself is a very, very expensive over-under sporting shotgun. That's a good way of saying exactly the message you're not trying to say. He seems somewhat comfortable with it, though at the same time he also does not look like he spends every weekend shooting sporting clays with that thing. And he seems more like the type of guy that goes out and maybe shoots some doves and maybe shoots a round of trap, once a year.
Yeah, the entire thing seems to exude an aura of I'm a gun owner, but.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly it. But he's definitely holding the AR and the pistol like they're a live snake. He looks extremely uncomfortable shooting them. I was actually just noting while looking at the freeze frame in the Twitter thread that I linked, and I was like saying, well, if he's doing the whole cross-eye dominant thing, I can clearly see he's holding the gun in his right hand and he's got his right eye closed. But then I realized, and he's got his thumb just dangling out in the air, and it's just, he's not quite shooting Weaver, not quite shooting Isosceles. It's ugly, and he very well may have both his eyes closed. And this is very much another one of the, see, I'm just like you booger-eating savages. It was very much struck me as a very, very hollow appeal of the, see, I'm a Second Amendment person. And
okay, I got a different vibe. I got more of the "How are you doing, fellow kids" vibe to it.
Yeah.
Hello, fellow conservative gun owners. I too like being conservative and gunning.
Yeah, I linked to the Mark McClosky campaign ad in the show notes in case you didn't see that joy of Mark McClosky putting on a pair of work gloves, obviously for the very, very first time in his life, and not knowing what the heck to do with his hands now that they're in work gloves. And he's got these like brand new jeans and work boots and a flannel shirt. And clearly this was all chosen as this will appeal to those cousin humping rednecks. It's just I am cosplaying as a flyover country middle American working class.
I believe the kids these days would say this is full of cringe.
I would concur with that observation. And so yeah, I saw this as exceptionally sloppy pandering, especially coming from the likes of Dr. Mehmet Oz.
Mm-hmm. I've got strong thoughts about Dr. Oz because I don't know anything about him as a physician, but I've seen him on TV a lot, and the position I have is that he is first and foremost a hawker. Mm-hmm. He is a salesman, and if you pay him money, he will promote whatever you want him to promote. I'm not saying he's specifically unethical, but I am saying that he is more in the showbiz side of things than he is in the medical side of things. And so to me, this was just a different form of selling something. And to back up that proposition is, well, we've got some history here about Dr. Oz and what he said about guns. And yeah, okay, he strongly supports the Second Amendment, but... And we've got a link, and, some people may not appreciate going to Fox News. You can probably find it in other places. But Dr. Oz has expressed support for red flag laws. Dr. Oz, there's a tweet from 2018, and I'm going to literally quote this. Right now, the CDC is not funded to study gun violence in this country. It's time we treat shootings as a public health problem. Contact your congressperson today to demand they fund the CDC to comprehensively study gun violence. #end the ban. And so, yeah, you support the Second Amendment? These words, I do not think it means what you think it means.
Yeah. Especially since the whole reason why the CDC ban, and it's not even a ban, it is just simply a limitation of saying that the public funds cannot be used for anti-gun propaganda, because that's exactly what it was being used for.
Yeah, now, if other people want to donate funds or even have a fundraiser, that's perfectly fine, but the taxpayers aren't going to fund it. But that's somehow a ban.
Yep. Yeah, and the CDC can and does study gun violence. There are studies that come out every single year. They just have to be cautious in their scope, that they are apolitical and not agenda-driven, one way or the other. And so, yeah, but that's not okay, because, again, we had things like the Kellerman study, which was just horrible junk science, but it was being pushed by anti-gun propaganda, and it's still being quoted today. That was like 30 years ago. And concealed carry was illegal in most of the places that he was studying. It was so long ago. His ear has been bent by the Bloomberg dollars. And you're 100% correct on him being a hawker. You may not say that he's unethical, and I would concur that he is not ethical, but I think his ethics may be more flexible than you or mine. So yeah, and that also could mean that just as much as does he necessarily believe that such and such herbal remedy that he has talked about on his television show is absolutely the cure-all that he's claiming it is? Maybe yes, maybe no. Maybe he also is not as in love with gun control as this, but he's certainly gone out and said it. And I would just note that clearly from this campaign ad, he is also not a diehard Second Amendment supporter, because he's putting on airs. He's clearly borrowing guns that make him look more like a gun owner or a gun nut, and then putting on what he thinks is a good show of shooting those guns.
You know, I would actually go so far as to give the benefit of the doubt that the shotgun is his.
Oh,
because again, we see him shooting it. He's confident with that. He's comfortable holding it. The pistol, maybe, probably not. I would be willing to wager serious money that the AR-15 is not his.
Oh, the AR-15 and the pistol are definitely not his. And if they are his, they were bought just for this campaign ad, and they belong to him only because he might find them useful later on. But under no circumstances does he have a desire to shoot them more, because he's clearly not having a good time. But the over-under shot, again, to point out, the over-under shotgun, that is the ultimate of FUD guns. And furthermore, also the one gun that is endorsed by President Biden.
All right. So while we're shaking our heads at this, all right, we've got to take it down a peg, because we're still going to be making fun of someone, but it's far more serious. You and I have expended a lot of time and a lot of breath talking about and analyzing Alec Baldwin's negligent discharge, that's what I'm going to call it, on the scene of the movie Rust that injured the director and killed the photographer Helena Hutchins. And I know you're just itching to talk about it. I'll let you go in just a moment here. But I know that David analyzed the mechanics of it pretty thoroughly, because he has one of those revolvers, and Brandon Herrera on video talked about it. And I believe both of them said the only way for this to have happened would be if he had his finger on the trigger, pulling it back enough that it disengaged the sear, so that when Baldwin thumbed the hammer back, it fell into place. And Herrera demonstrated that perfectly on video. And now there have been leaked footage from Rust where Baldwin was practicing. We don't see the actual shooting, but this is prior. And oh gosh, oh golly, his finger is on the trigger, even though he said it wasn't. And so it's really starting to look like it happened exactly the way the experts said it happened. His finger was on the trigger, it disengaged the sear, he thumbed the hammer back, bang.
Yep. And we both had this on the mind. By the way, I'll also point out I've got a link to Stephen Gutowski, and he's in the Reload podcast. He actually further took out a single action army clone and demonstrated how the various stops on the hammer work, and was pointing out the fact that no, you really can't thumb the hammer back in any way, shape, or form and have it slam forward. It's going to catch on one of the notches, and the only way to get it off of those notches is to pull the trigger. But you also linked to Emily Miller, who posted the full video of Alec Baldwin's interrogation, and I gotta say, I ended up watching the whole thing. I took little drips and drabs of it all day because it's like an hour and 13 minutes.
And you can only take so much of him, right?
Actually, I found that I am normally have been pretty harsh with Alec Baldwin, and this hasn't really changed my mind too much. But boy, I really was feeling for him, and I could definitely say that despite the fact that I personally consider Alec Baldwin an amazing actor. I'm not necessarily a huge fan of him as a man, but I'm absolutely a huge fan of him on the screen. I can't really think of a single Alec Baldwin performance that I haven't thought was great. But yeah, his talking with the with the detectives and talking about how everything went down, him being upset. I don't think he was acting. Again, it could be wrong, but just being just so amazed that so much could fall through the cracks. And I certainly believe that there is definitely a lot of problems with the production crew on this, be it Hannah Gutierrez Reed, who was the armorer, or the various directors and assistant directors and all that who were in charge of how the guns were handled on set. But one of the big takeaways that I really wanted to discuss in this was that in this interview, Alec Baldwin notes that one, they were asking him how did he get the gun, and he said that he was in full makeup and costume and sat down in the pew of the church where the scene was to be shot, and then Hannah Reed came up to him and gave him the gun. They asked him, did she say it was a cold gun? And he thought so but couldn't remember, which is one kind of red flag there. And then furthermore stated that because what they were doing at the time of the shooting was a rehearsal. This was not, they were recording, and I have it on authority that the shot that actually killed the director of photography is captured, and the police have possession of this video, but it is not the one that is in the show notes.
Yeah, because Emily, I believe she got access to it, but she made the decision, and rightly so, I applaud her. She said she wasn't going to publish it, and mainly because Ms. Hutchins' son and husband, they've been through enough. They don't need to have it floating around on the internet. And so that's absolutely the right call. By the way, for people who are curious, Emily Miller is the same Emily who lived in D.C. She may still, but who wrote the How Emily Got Her Gun. So just FYI, she's very pro Second Amendment.
Yeah, and an excellent writer as well. So she does amazing work. But the big thing he was saying was because this was essentially just a rehearsal, and they were really just doing beats and figuring out timing and angles and can you see all the important things. Like one of the things Alec Baldwin was saying in one of his interviews is trying to make sure that they could see him thumbing the hammer back, because that was an important action for the audience to see in that. So in all of this, there's not going to be any actual shots fired. They were not set up and prepared for a blank to be discharged, which I believe was going to be called for in the actual shot. So in theory, the gun should have been completely empty, which would lead me to say that if Alec Baldwin stated that he didn't check the gun because he'd been scolded by armorers in the past for checking the gun. And I could see that if they'd say sequenced the, dummy rounds and blanks in such a way that the gun would work in the way that it needed to, but the camera wouldn't see the blanks. And so therefore, if someone goes and spins the cylinder, they've screwed everything up. But in this case, if the gun's supposed to be empty, it only takes a half a second to open the loading gate and spin the cylinder and just count 6, 7 empty holes. There you go. I counted to 8 and they're all empty holes. I know they only hold 6 or 5, or I don't even know what the gun holds. Let's not assume that these guys are all gun nuts. And if he had opened it up and instead of seeing a black hole inside that loading gate, he saw brass, he could say, hold on a second. What the heck is going on here? Why is there brass in here? Is there supposed to be brass in here? And then, and deal with all of that. And then, so that's one step that, again, gunnies do. You may, if someone hands you a gun, you may be thinking about something else. You may be doing something else and you might not know. And I don't remember if I talked about it on this show, but my dad and I were talking about this, and he was asking some fairly technical questions because he wasn't understanding exactly how that could have been shot. So I just went downstairs and grabbed a couple of guns and brought them upstairs and showed him. I said, here's a revolver. This is a double action revolver, but we can use it kind of the same way and all that. And every time I was about to do something where I was going to either be manipulating the hammer or manipulating the trigger of the gun, I would always just check it because I'm in my living room standing there next to my father. The gun's pointed a safe direction, but I don't want to put a hole in anything. Why not check it? Did I check it before? Yes, I checked it before. And I had a couple of different guns just to demonstrate stuff. And so every time I switched guns, check them just to make sure. Did I think ammo jumped into them? No, but it only takes a half a second to check. And this is the reason why. And then furthermore, Alec Baldwin also took this gun, which he knew was a real gun. He thought it was empty, but he knew it was a real gun. This was not a rubber duck. This was not an airsoft. This was not a non-gun. This was a live .45 Colt revolver, and he pointed it at 2 living human beings while he was doing this progression. And that's a huge no-no, both for gun safety and for filming. And so while I'm going to say I definitely gained some sympathy from Alec Baldwin watching this video, and not all the blame falls on him. He said it himself in the interview. I'm the one that pointed the gun at her and a bullet came out and hit her. How do you think that makes me feel? And that's exactly it, is that no matter who's to blame, it's starting to look like Hannah Reed had a bunch of live ammo on the set and was going off shooting in the desert with some of the crew just to blow off steam in between, in the downtime of that. And it seems the most likely story that one of those live rounds got mixed in with some dummy rounds or something and got into Alec Baldwin's gun. And in these rehearsals, he's pulling the hammer back and pulling the trigger. And I don't know if he was dry firing or attempting to thumb the hammer back, but he ended up dropping the hammer on a primer and killed one person and wounded another one. And no matter what anybody else did, that was his action. That was what he did. And that's what he's going to have to live with. And that's why you will see me do stupid amounts of press checks and magazine drops and things like that whenever I'm handling a gun in a non-hot range.
It's kind of funny, although when you stop and think about it, it makes perfect sense. But it has always amused me that the firearms community, firearms ownership, is the one place where it is not only perfectly acceptable, but almost encouraged to be OCD. If you're one of those people who has to check something 5 or 6 times, I mean, we may go a little excessive, but we aren't going to fault you for it.
I have literally press checked a gun twice in a row because I realized that I'm an ADD squirrel boy, and I've realized that
you weren't fully paying attention.
That's right. I was heading out to run some errands, and okay, I'm heading out the door. Oh, I'm not carrying a gun. Let's put a gun on. Out comes the gun, and I have done the press check on all. I've done this, the check on all my guns so many times that it's just second nature. And the gun's pointed in a safe direction, and I'm opening the cylinder of the revolver. I'm press checking the gun. I'm checking the magazine and all that. But I've realized I'm thinking about what groceries I'm going to go buy. Did you really see that there was a round in the chamber? Did you really see that the magazine was fully loaded? Did you confirm that if it's my 1911 that the safety was on, or if it's my Sig Sauer that the safety was off? Oh, geez, I guess I wasn't paying super attention. Let's do it all over again, this time with feeling. And yeah, and I encourage that because, again, there's 2 sides of this coin. There's the side where you point the unloaded gun at another person and pull the trigger and they die. And then there's also the instance where your life is on the line and you need to pull the trigger to save your life. And it turns out that you went to the range last week and you forgot to, and you didn't reload that gun and it's empty. So yeah, and you know what? Let's switch over to my big soapbox. We need to teach gun safety and basic gun handling in public schools. We are a Second Amendment country. Even in places like New York, people own guns. And in the places where the guns are there are people that own illegal guns. And if the kids are playing and they find their brother who maybe is a little bit into some bad stuff, find their brother's gun. This actually happened in Massachusetts a few years ago. Two young boys were playing in their cousin's bedroom. Cousin was actually in prison at the time for drug offenses, and they found that he had a gun stashed somewhere, and they started playing with it. No. Make sure that every kid, even kids that aren't from gun nut families and their parents don't think they're ever going to handle a gun, make sure they know all the things so that if they become a famous actor and someone hands them a cold gun, they say, oh yeah, let me have a look. So that's all.
You got on your soapbox, and briefly one of mine is, and this is not unique to Baldwin, but Baldwin is currently the spokesman for it. There are people who believe that because they don't own guns, they don't need to know how to use them safely. And this is a man who literally uses them as part of his job. But he said in that interview, oh, I'm not a gun person. I don't know how to do, X or Y. And you would think, I mean, it's certainly what I would do. It's certainly what you would do, that regardless of how you feel about personally owning a gun, if you use one in your job, you would know the rules for it. And that's the sad thing. Just the merest surface level application of Cooper's 4 rules would have prevented this tragedy.
Mm-hmm. Yep, he could have checked the gun to see that it was unloaded since it didn't need to be loaded, and that would have solved this completely. He could have said, "Hey, you guys are standing in front of me while I'm pointing the gun at the camera. Why don't you back away from the camera and look at the monitor from a safe place?" And then of course, it just. And he could have kept his finger off the trigger, though I'm not gonna fault him on that one. I kind of don't understand where my finger wasn't on the trigger, because people didn't hold their finger off the trigger in the Old West, and so that would just be bad acting. If we saw somebody with their finger indexed high up onto the cylinder of a Colt single action army in what's supposed to be 1810. Well, shifting gears again, I teased it last week, but when I sat down with Philip Smith of the National African American Gun Association to clarify NAAGA is indeed in favor of constitutional carry, I also asked him about his opinion on the demotion of ATF acting director Marvin Richardson. So once again, I am pleased to welcome back to the Assorted Calibers podcast, Philip Smith of the National African American Gun Association. How you doing, Phil?
Doing great. Glad to be here, man.
So I just heard about this, and I wanted to ask you about NAAGA's position on the ATF director Marvin Richardson and his demotion.
I think on our initial review of it and our gut feeling, we are very, very disappointed and concerned that a lifetime, and I want to stress lifetime, ATF employee who has worked his way up as an African-American man to the level as a director, now to be, I don't even think they have a good reason just to pull the rug from underneath his legs to say, no, you can't have the position, and to demote him. Is not only we feel unfair, it's just wrong in a moral sense, because this guy is good for the organization on many different levels. First of all, he will be, I think, the first African American to take the position. He's not the first to be nominated, but he's the first to take the position if he's allowed to stay, which I think is a very good symbol for the country. Mm-hmm. No matter what your color, what your gender, you work your way up through the ranks, you work hard. It's just a really good feel story to ATF, and I think they're missing that. This guy, from what I understand, is loved by the rank and file. He's well respected by the industry, the firearms industry, and others, because he's fair, he's balanced. He understands the subtle nuances of the position and the importance of the position, and that can't be overstated. Now he's to be demoted unfairly and unjustly, to be replaced by a gentleman by the name of Steve Dettelbach by the current administration. And this guy, Mr. Dettelbach, if I'm pronouncing his name incorrectly, I apologize to the audience.
I joked when it was first announced that it's okay if we don't know how to pronounce his name, because President Biden, when announcing him, did not know how to pronounce his name.
Okay. Well, Mr. Dettelbach or Dettelbach, whatever, is someone that has no connection with the ATF. In fact, he has a connection with groups that are anti-gun, which is problematic in itself. How can you have someone that has a leaning to be anti-gun to now be placed over an organization within the U.S. government that is supposed to be managing and monitoring and having a working professional relationship with various gun companies? To me, it seems like they're really trying to set up a system where they're going to be really applying pressure to make things more difficult for ammo companies, for firearm manufacturers, by having him in this. I don't see any positives at all. And I think, going back to my initial statement, when you have a good feel story, and this Marvin Richardson being the person being in the position right now, it's a good feel story. It looks good. It feels good. He's worked 30 years. He's had guns pointed in his face as a field officer, and he's worked his way all the way up for this country, giving his blood, sweat, and tears, almost losing his life. Now to be the ATF director, and for some reason he's not good enough. When everyone around him said, "We're glad you're there. Thank God you're here." To me, that means people that are making those decisions about his career path aren't listening, and they're not only are they not listening, they don't care. And when you don't care about what's happening to American citizens that are in a place like this, to me, it's troubling. And without getting too political, I'll say this: when you feel like you can just ceremoniously or unceremoniously just demote someone and feel like you're above any type of retribution, to me, that's problematic. I was raised very simply by some parents who were from the country. Wrong is wrong and right is right, and this is wrong. If he had done something wrong, I get it. Is there something that came up in his background check? If he said something publicly that was anti-American, anti-ATF, and just not a good fit, I would get it, and I would have nothing to say. But, he had his day in the sun, and he needs to be removed. But he did none of those things. He's done the same thing he's done every day of his life for the last 30 years. He's came to work. He's put sweat, tears, time, effort into the job to become very, very good. You don't get to that level just by luck. 30 years is a long time in one agency, going through those landmines of your career path, and to get to that level and just get it snatched out. I just think it's a travesty, and I think everyone who considers himself American, particularly African Americans, we should stand up, and I think we are speaking out on this. I made a statement publicly, and I made a statement on our newsletter to our members that we all need to start contacting our elected officials and to let the current administration know how we feel about this, because this is bad for us on many, many different levels.
Yeah. And again, for those that don't know, I mean, Marvin Richardson was stating that he was planning on retiring soon. And this demotion, I believe, is not only, I mean, just a public shaming, but it's also going to affect his pension for the rest of his life when he does retire.
Absolutely. He will not be retiring as a director level, financial level. He was going to be demoted, and his financial payout will be dramatically less as a non-director within ATF. Everyone knows that, if you're in the government or even have an inkling of idea of how the pay grades go, that's a big difference. And that's like another slap in the face. It's just, like I said, it's just not a good feeling for anyone that is, pro firearms, pro ATF. It's a bad feel, regardless of how you look at this, to me. And obviously I'm very biased, but I think this gentleman has worked very hard, and he should not be yanked out of the position just because a political appointee, and that's what it is. Let's be honest. It's a political appointee by the current administration to replace this black man. And I think that is the ultimate slap in the face to him and to our community. So I think we need to stand up and yell as loud as we possibly can.
Well, let's go a step further down into that. I've spoken quite a bit about the anti-black and anti-minority sentiment towards gun control in general. And we have talked extensively on the Assorted Calibers podcast about David Chipman, who is not only an anti-gun lobbyist and is still currently working as an anti-gun lobbyist, but also someone who I deeply suspect was torpedoed as the nominee because word got out that he has done several things that are very indicative to someone who has racial bias against black agents. Do you see this adding into the pattern? Because I kind of do.
I do. I think I always allow somebody to make one mistake. We all make mistakes. But when you do the same thing again, but even at a higher level or a much more exposed level, then you're doing it with intent, and you're doing it with lack of concern about what people think or how they think. One time, okay, I'll give you a pass, but not two. And this guy clearly has some, I think, racial issues in terms of African Americans and their professionalism within the ATF. It's not a surprise to me that I've heard, that he has something to do with, in addition to the current administration, of getting rid of Mr. Marvin Richardson. It's not a surprise. And I think it shouldn't be a surprise to a lot of the folks who are in the 2A community that this has happened. But we do have an option. We do have a way to fight this, and that's with our voices, and that's with our phones, and that's with our text to our elected officials, and put a lot of heat and pressure on them and say, we're not going to stand for this. I know we know what you're trying to do, but we're not going to let this happen. And I want to make sure everybody understands this is not a political statement. This is not about Republicans versus Democrats versus Republicans. This is right versus wrong. You can't continually go ahead and hurt people and put people in place who want to hurt people that look like me, or have an insensitivity or lack of sensitivity toward people that look like me. Why would you want to put that kind of person in place, one of the largest federal organizations in the country? I don't get it, and I don't buy it.
Well, the cynic in me, we've talked previously on the show about how NAAGA not only talks about training and local laws and the political landscape of gun control, but also the political history of gun control. And unfortunately, I would note that the earliest gun control laws in the United States all center around keeping African Americans, specifically Black freedmen, as well as Native Americans, away from guns in various locations. So, it's hard not to start seeing a pattern when you see things like this.
Yeah, it's just a modern version of something that happened, hundreds of years ago. They're still trying to prevent I believe our community from having guns. Because I'm just a big advocate, as you know. I think our community is much better off when we have firearms to protect ourselves, to stabilize our communities, to keep thugs and drug dealers out, to keep those bad elements out. And folks, crooks are very, very smart in the sense that they know where to go or look for soft targets, as we say in the firearms world. If you make yourself a soft target, and by continually not arming yourself, you know what's going to happen? You're going to get continually attacked, continually getting bad folks coming at you. But when you're able to protect yourself, and that's where the Second Amendment is so valuable and so important for the African American community. When you have that Second Amendment and you're allowed to buy a gun, like through the constitutional carry that we have here in Georgia, it goes full circle, and you now can stabilize your communities. You can keep those thugs out because they know if they go over there, we got something for you. You try to rob those guys that live in that community, they're going to protect themselves. So crooks are going to look elsewhere. They want an easy hit. They want something quick and easy where they're not going to get challenged. And that's why guns is the difference maker. When you have a firearm, it kind of puts a line in the sand. It doesn't guarantee anything, but at least gives you a fighting chance to protect yourself, your family, your loved ones, and you obviously protect the overall integrity of the country by having people that care about it that have firearms.
I couldn't agree more. And of course, you can learn more of that by looking up the NAAGA's website, the National African American Gun Association. There'll be links in the show notes to that. And I would like to thank Phil Smith. Thank you so much for coming on the Assorted Calibers podcast.
No, absolutely. Enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, this is just an ugly, ugly case. I mean, we've got, number one, we got Chipman with his racist remarks. Biden has certainly said some nasty stuff himself. And so demoting a black man, and the replacement is, I believe he would identify as white, but he is certainly not not black. Is there, and it's just, and this is just before he retires, so this is also going to be screwing up his retirement plan. Oh, what a hack job.
I just remember some of the stories that came out, and I don't mean stories about Biden. I mean, you can literally find recordings of this, where he has said things which, while not absolutely 100% racist, are still, they're enough to make me do the side eye. I mean, in addition to him saying to a black person, if you don't vote for me, you ain't black. But there's also that long, garbled, and, well, if I'm being charitable, probably not 100% truthful, maybe garbled through memories, but it really sounds like a fabrication, where he tells the story about corn pop while he was a lifeguard at a city pool. And yeah, it's not enough for me to say, oh, I can state, with 100% certainty that Joe Biden's a racist. But I mean, he's of a certain age. He's of a generation. He grew up around racism and segregation, and I think that there are some things he just hasn't gotten past yet. And at his age, he just won't. And so, unfortunately, this does seem to be in keeping with his administration.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a great line from or scene from Kill Bill. It's from Kill Bill Volume 2 by Quentin Tarantino, where Bill is talking about Superman and Clark Kent, and noting that Superman was born Superman and he only pretends to be Clark Kent. It's not like Batman is Bruce Wayne and he puts on the Batman costume. Clark Kent is Superman's costume, and Clark Kent is Superman's impersonation of a human, and that he is cowardly and he is weak and he is meek. And that's what Superman thinks of people. And let's face it, Corn Pop didn't exist. There's no one who thinks that Corn Pop exists except for maybe Joe Biden in some of his worst states. And Corn Pop is Joe Biden's depiction of what a black person is. And that is absolutely racist and disgusting. And I will add, my personal favorite is when he said that white kids are just as smart as poor kids. Good job, Joe.
Right. I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah.
Oh, dear. Oh, dear. I don't like to use the word because it's been overused and it often isn't used correctly, but I feel confident in saying this administration is problematic.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I mean, on so many levels. I mean, let's shift gears to some more Joe Biden audio, because while we're on the topic of all of this, I mentioned that the current acting director has been demoted, and now Joe Biden is trying to install a new ATF director. And I decided to do a Fisk of the acceptance speech that the latest ATF director, the nominee for ATF director, gave when introduced by Joe Biden. So here we go again. After his nominee to lead the ATF, anti-gun activist David Chipman, was torpedoed in part for his employment with an anti-freedom, anti-American lobbying group, but also in part because of his disciplinary action for his anti-black sentiments as an ATF agent. Biden now has a new pick to run the agency.
Today, to lead and support the dedicated men and women of the AFT, I'm proud to nominate Steve Dettelbach. Excuse me, I mispronounced your name. As Director of Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives.
Yep. President Biden is totally with it. No cognitive decline at all. It's perfectly normal for a sitting president to forget the name of a man he's about to introduce in the press conference where he's announcing the nominee to head the AFT. Yeah, President Biden remembered Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. Well, kinda. But rather than saying BATFE or ATF, he said AFT. Uh-huh. Also, I have it on good authority, his name is pronounced Dettelbach. While not as clearly anti-gun as David Chipman, given that Mr. Dettelbach is a former U.S. attorney from Ohio rather than an anti-gun lobbyist, he still has some gun control skeletons in his closet from being an Everytown endorsed candidate and speaking out against actual common sense gun laws, like removing the worthless gun-free zone restrictions on schools, as well as endorsing universal background check laws, red flag laws, and banning of so-called assault weapons. Further, this speech was given directly after President Biden gave a lengthy speech about the ATF, or AFT as the president called it, new directive on so-called ghost guns, with no comment or complaint. I'll be covering that speech in a future Fisk. Of course, Biden gets into Mr. Dettelbach's limelight one more time.
I also want to thank my incredible, supportive, and often patient family who are here, my wonderful wife, Carol, and my children, Allie and David, please.
He's 16 years old. I'm going to draft him.
Is there an agent in the house?
What? Draft him? For what? What do we draft kids for at 16? I filled out my selective service card just before my 18th birthday, but it's not like we've used the draft since the war in Vietnam. My mind goes to President Biden's documented inappropriate contact with minor children, but he certainly seems to favor the little girls over the little boys. Either way, this was neither funny, appropriate, or even understandable, and I don't think someone who's having this much trouble should be telling us how we should be able to defend our lives or what we should be able to defend our lives with.
I started as a career prosecutor back in 1992, and I have spent 3 decades watching and admiring agents and staff at the ATF, along with its federal, state, and local law enforcement partners, as they work tirelessly and courageously to protect the American people.
Yikes! Do you realize that the Ruby Ridge Massacre was in 1992? And the siege at Waco was in 1993? That's a tough couple of years for the ATF. And that's where you start your speech? So the image of protecting people you're going for is Vicki Weaver shot dead with a baby in her hands and 26 children killed when the compound was burned at Waco? Interestingly enough, Ruby Ridge and the Waco siege were some of the government oversights that Timothy McVeigh cited in his reason for bombing the federal building in Oklahoma City in 1995. And McVeigh's bombing was the #1 inspiration for the killers at Columbine in 1999. The ATF doesn't take all the blame for these incidents. But man, I just wanted to note what a mess the 90s were for federal agencies, including the ATF, and it was Mr. Dettelbach who got me thinking about it.
I've seen firsthand the work that so many at the ATF do to protect us from violence. They're dedicated, they're professional, and they're effective. They don't write the laws. Their mission every day is just to go out and enforce those laws and protect the public from a wide range of threats.
No, they don't write the law. But they did just rule that 80% parts kits now be considered firearms, and even putting stricter serial number rules on these kits than what's required of actual firearms. This is also the same group who ruled that bump stocks were 100% legal accessories, and now they're illegal machine guns. And pistol stabilizing braces keep going from legal to illegal every few years. They don't write the laws for sure, but the laws they enforce aren't actually written anywhere, except the white papers that the ATF writes and releases. And then they enforce the law, not how Congress wrote it, but how they wrote it, without actually writing the law, because legally they don't have the power to write the law.
When I was U.S. Attorney, our office partnered with the ATF and the Cleveland Police as they doggedly investigated and brought a case involving the deadliest home arson in Cleveland history, killed 9 people, including 8 kids. I also saw the ATF partner with the FBI and our office, first to find and then to bring to justice a bigot who drove from Indiana to outside Toledo to torch the largest mosque in Ohio.
So why are we calling for more gun control and not common sense incendiary device control? If it saves just one life, I mean, I can assemble a Molotov cocktail in less than 30 minutes using 0 tools, all with items I can buy without a background check. I even know the trick to making the kind that can be kept in a fully sealed container and ignite when the glass breaks. Will somebody think of the children?
I have partnered with the ATF for decades in its crucial fight against gun violence. You know, whether it was taking a single violent recidivist off the street in Maryland or putting together a big racketeering case against a violent gang in Youngstown, Ohio. I have seen the ATF work with other law enforcement to make so many of our communities safer.
I have no problem with the ATF enforcing existing and written laws. My issue is that they reinterpret the law at will and create new criminals out of thin air rather than going after the violent and dangerous ones that are driving violent crime in America.
Got to recognize that many Americans still face fear and isolation, not because of a virus, but because of an epidemic of firearms violence. It's not a new problem, and it has many causes. That's why it's going to take an all-hands-on-deck partnership approach to address that issue. And the ATF will be there.
Again, with the medical terms for gun violence as an epidemic. Given Mr. Dettelbach's anti-gun history and his use of anti-gun terminology and his universal endorsement by anti-gun groups, plus the fact that he's following on the heels of a racist anti-rights lobbyist, I'm rooting for his nomination to follow the path of David Chipman, right down the drain. Those are your anti-gun talking points and a few rebuttals to combat them.
They don't write the laws. The hell they don't. Again, one of my hobby horse things. It's called Chevron deference. Look it up. Learn to loathe it.
Yeah, and especially since they've even actually adjusted the law in this latest thing on, like, you know, for the definitions of full auto, or for the forced reset triggers and all that, because they clearly don't behave like how they were going. And that's also the clarification of the split receivers, which absolutely existed in this, but no, they're absolutely rewriting the law. Like, these interpretations are going outside of both the scope of what people knew when the law was written and how the law was actually written down. But it doesn't seem to matter. So hopefully this will be fixed in our lifetime.
You are practically a Pollyanna compared to me. I don't see it getting fixed in our lifetime. I see it getting worse.
Yeah.
But 1, I'm cynical, and 2, I have been proven wrong before. I've Okay, according to my predictions, we would be hip deep in Civil War by now, and we're not, and I'm thankful to be wrong. So, we'll just see which one of us is right.
In the words of Monty Python, now for something completely different.
So Weer'd always tells me that less is more when introducing segments. In that case, ARPCC? Okay.
Hi, and welcome to Gun Lovers and Other Strangers. As I mentioned back in ACP episode 154, I've been sourcing parts to build a Colt Model 6450 9mm carbine replica for a while. Well, it's finally done. In this segment, I'd like to talk about my new addition and some consideration for those interested in building their own. In the show notes, you'll find a list of some of the 9mm ARPCC specific parts. It's an incomplete list because I already had some of the parts, and others have become difficult or impossible to source in the last couple years. For example, the proper retro receiver halves are almost unobtainium right now. Nodax Spud was the premier source of retro AR upper and lower receivers, as well as some other specialized parts, and they're no longer in operation. According to Mike, the former owner of Nodax Spud and current head of the Harrington and Richardson brand, quote, "It will easily take until summer before we have things rolling. So many elements need to come together," unquote. I look forward to when production resumes. They will be getting more of my money. But enough of that. On to the build details. Two of the major considerations for proper operation of a 9mm ARPCC is buffer length and the combined weight of the bolt and buffer. This is because the 6450 is a straight blowback firearm. The bolt is not locked at the moment of firing. Therefore, the weight of the bolt and buffer are of considerable importance. In addition, a 9mm bolt is shorter than a 5.56 bolt carrier group. This means in recoil, the 9mm buffer and bolt will go further back into the receiver extension. This can cause two issues. One, the front of the fire control pocket is exposed at full recoil, increasing the chance of fouling, debris, or even an empty shell casing winding up in there and interfering with operation. Two, the bolt will have farther to travel forward, picking up more speed before hitting the bolt hold open, potentially damaging or breaking that part. There are two options to resolve the buffer length issue. Either a buffer with a longer base, or a spacer that goes at the rear of the recoil spring. Both will work well to ameliorate this concern, so it's buyer's choice. For the buffer, I went with the CAC Industries Configurable Buffer Kit. This comes with 3 sets of weights, allowing the user to configure them for best performance. Me being me, I accidentally ordered the standard length buffer instead of the extended one, so I had to get a spacer for the other end of the recoil spring. Assembly of the firearm is pretty straightforward. There are only 2 elements of significant difference from a standard AR. First is the magazine well adapter. There are several different styles. Some are installed through the top of the lower receiver, others through the bottom. The truly traditional Colt style requires drilling the magazine well for roll pins. The one I bought inserts through the bottom of the magazine well and is held in place by 2 set screws at the mag well opening and a 3rd screw at the top, making it very secure. Simply follow the manufacturer instructions and all should be well. Being of the Colt style, my mag well takes modified Uzi magazines, either vintage or new production. I have some of each. The Uzi magazines need to be modified by having a magazine catch hole cut in them and the spine of the magazine relieved at the top so the bolt has proper clearance. Uzi magazines altered in this manner will function in an AR-style PPC, but they won't lock the bolt back after the last shot is fired. Other designs of magazine well adapter take the ubiquitous Glock magazine, but I was going for an accurate reproduction of a retro firearm, so that wouldn't do. The other difference from assembling a standard AR is the ejection port door assembly. The original Colt style uses a shortened door and a rubber gas deflector. To clarify, it's not a brass deflector, it's a gas deflector. As I already mentioned, this is a straight blowback system. The bolt starts moving at the moment of firing. This means excess combustion residue exits the ejection port fairly early in the extraction process, and without the gas deflector, could pepper the user in the face. Installation of the port door and gas deflector is only slightly different than a standard AR, but may require an extra hand due to the additional parts needing to be wrangled. Once everything was all together and it had passed the mechanical function and safety checks, it was time to test fire my creation. I'm happy to say it operated flawlessly. Brass ejected consistently and landed in about a 3-foot circle. Accuracy was excellent at the 10-yard test distance, cutting one ragged hole in the target with a couple of flyers. Those were more likely the fault of the shooter rather than the gun. This was a fun project and a welcome distraction from both personal and global troubles. While I don't expect this style of PCC is everyone's cup of tea, I'm pleased with how it turned out, and it's a welcome addition to my collection.
Remember, ladies, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. Oh, and I've arranged something special for Amber.
That about wraps up this segment. If you have any questions for me or suggestions for future segments, or a comment on a past segment, please post them on the Assorted Calibers Podcast Facebook or MeWe pages, and Aaron or Weer'd will make sure I get them. I'm also a contributor on the Blue Collar Prepping blog, which can be found at bluecollarprepping.blogspot.com. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. I am David, and this is Gun Lovers and Other Strangers.
I was telling David about this. I had heard Ian and Carl, I think it was on In Range TV, talking about how they felt that 9mm ARs actually recoiled more than 5.56, and David says that his carbine has less recoil than a 5.56, and I think it also probably depends on. He talked a lot about I was thinking about that when he was talking about the throw of the bolt. Is one of the big things for mitigating recoil is it's not that the gun is actually the recoil energy. It's that when the bolt bottoms out on the receiver and then changes direction, that's when you get that jarring kick and you feel recoil and it bumps the gun around. And so it very well could be that if you balance the bolt just right, you can really mitigate a ton of recoil.
I'm sitting here trying to remember the last time I shot my Kel-Tec, which I know isn't an AR PCC, but it's a PCC nonetheless. Yep. And then trying to remember the last time I shot my AR, and oh god, it's been too long. I do want to say that the 9mm recoils a little bit more. But this is going to call for more testing, and maybe that'll actually get me off my butt and off to the range where I need to be.
Yeah, do a little A-B comparison. But yeah, and for those that are going, what? 9mm versus 5.56? The deuce you say. One of the big factors is that a straight blowback gun needs to have a very, very heavy bolt, because it's not locking up mechanically. But meanwhile, the 5.56 is gas operated, and therefore it can deal with a much, much lighter bolt and bolt carrier. And so that's the idea, is the reciprocating mass moving back and forth.
I will tell you this much. With the Kel-Tec Sub 2000, not only does it have a big, heavy bolt, but it actually comes in two parts. You've got the actual bolt part, and then there's another part that connects to it that connects to the charging handle in the back. So you've got it's two-piece that sort of slides together, and they're both pretty heavy, just chunks of metal. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Thanks to each and every one of our listeners, and a very special thanks to all our supporters on Patreon. To be our Patreon patron, go to patreon.com/Assorted Calibers Podcast to sign up. You get good stuff being a patron. You get early release of the podcast. I don't know. Does that make that much of a difference to it? Like, I became a member of the Reload, and I get an early access to the podcast. I still listen to it on Monday like everybody else. But you get early listen to the podcast a couple days early. But you can also get the blooper reels. People love the blooper reels. It's all sorts of off topic and weird and funny stuff. There's some good stuff in this show. I'm just saying. We also have the ACP film tracks, where you can listen to us ruin fine movies in Aaron's opinion, or get glorious gems of humor and facts while watching classic movies. And of course, we've got the ACP Mag Dump, which is our unscripted, more freeform show.
I don't think I've ever said that you ruined them. It's more like a lot of these things, hey, I haven't seen that movie, so of course, the first time I watch it, I'm gonna want a bunch of yahoos making comments. No! Also, please remember to rate us on Apple Podcasts, subscribe to us on the platform of your choice, and share the show with your friends, both online and off.
I got a blog. It's called WeirDWorld.com, and I'm also on Handgun Radio. It's all right.
I have all sorts of blogs, some more neglected than others. You can find me at Lurking Rhythmically, where people need to kick me to remind me to write more. And of course, I've got Blue Collar Prepping, which I curate. Weird, when I talk like this, can you see the extended pinky as I take a sip of my tea?
I can see it is very, very glorious. And I appreciate your crushed velour smoking jacket.
Why, thank you.
And thanks to Nate Spencer for our music.
So I thought it was pronounced Dettelbach. Weer'd says it's pronounced Dettelbach. But we all know the proper pronunciation for it is Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice. Our pronunciation is Assorted, and so's our podcast. Good night, everybody.
It's showtime.